Good evening, everyone. My name is Terry Fitzgerald. I am the Advocacy and Outreach Coordinator for YWCA Hartford region. On behalf of YWCA, I would like to thank you all for joining us for this second night of our Equity Isn't a Game, Women and Girls in Sports Listening Session series. Recently, we've heard the testimonies of Simone Biles, Sha'Carri Richardson, and Serena Williams speak to the inequities women in sports face and the parallel mental health challenges they compete with daily. Tonight, we'll be exploring the experiences of women in college sports from the Hartford region and beyond. Prior to this event, you were encouraged to complete a survey telling your own story of inequitable experiences you have encountered in the sports industry. If you have not done so yet, we encourage you to click the link in the chat, which I will drop in a moment, and share with us. The purpose of this series is to listen using the survey that the YWCA Hartford Region Department for Community Engagement and Advocacy will listen to your experiences to evaluate opportunities for advocacy and action to achieve equity for women and girls in the sports industry. During our time together, it is our hope that you will listen to women leading in the industry discuss the challenges they have faced and the tools they have used to address these challenges. But before we meet our panelists, we'd like to start our conversation to gain a deeper understanding of the psychological landscape young women are navigating at the college athletes and what unique challenges and stressors they face in navigating sports inequities. To paint this picture for us, we have with us Dr. Regina Wilson. Dr. Regina Wilson completed her master's degree and doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Connecticut. She has been licensed by the state of Connecticut since 2000. Dr. Wilson has been in private practice for the past 21 years, but she has over 28 years of clinical work experience. In her professional career, Dr. Wilson has worked in a variety of settings, including child guidance and inpatient and outpatient psychiatric facilities. She has also provided clinical and administrative supervision for clinical graduate students at the University of Connecticut Department of Psychology Mental Health Clinic. Dr. Wilson uses an integrative, dynamic, and holistic approach to partner with her clients to meet their therapeutic goals. Dr. Wilson is well-versed in evidence-based treatment modalities, including but not limited to trauma-informed treatment approaches, cognitive behavioral therapy, solution-focused psychoeducation, behavior modification, and dialectic behavioral therapy. Dr. Wilson is a board member and vice president of the CT BIPOC Mental Health and Wellness Initiative, where she has conducted numerous psychoeducational and healing forums for the BIPOC community. Welcome, Dr. Wilson.
I apologize. I had to stop the share to get to find the unmute button. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm looking forward to this discussion on mental health and women in college sports. I decided to put a little PowerPoint together because I think it would be helpful as a guide to what we're talking about today. So when we talk about mental health, what are we talking about? You know, a lot of times people hear mental health and, you know, the first thing they want to say, I'm not crazy. You know, there's nothing wrong with me. You know, I don't have any issues. And, you know, mental health just refers to the mind. The mind is the mental piece and the mental piece. Mental peace. And when your mind isn't working correctly, that's when you have mental health issues. So, and if your mind isn't working right, it affects the way, you know, how you do things, how you think, and how you feel. And so what we know about female athletes and women in general are at greater risk for depression and anxiety. But we also know that female athletes are at greater risk than their male counterparts for this. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among female college athletes. And we know that when you don't address these mental health issues, that it's going to affect your performance. So if you're feeling depressed, your energy is going to be affected. You're not going to perform as well on the field. You're feeling anxious and tense. You may make the wrong move, and this is like, you mentioned Simone Biles. She recognized that something was off, that she could not go out there without possibly jeopardizing her physical health, right? She may have hurt herself, and she made a decision not to go. And a lot of times, I think athletes don't necessarily do this because, you feel like, you're out there to perform. You need to do this. This is what you worked hard for. This is what you trained for. But you also have to step back and have some awareness that sometimes you do need to look at your mental health, because if your well-being isn't in place, intact, everything else is going to be affected. And that's that whole mind-body connection. It's not that your mental health is separate from your emotional health. It's not separate from your physical body. They're all connected. And if one of them is off, everything else is going to be thrown off. An interesting thing I also found was that, the NCAA has begun to recognize that within the sports arena, that mental health is something that they haven't really been paying enough attention to. And they've actually decided they've made recommendations to pay more attention to it, to put more awareness to it. And they're asking for schools and universities to kind of create an environment of wellness and including, introducing mental health services. Not going to go in depth on this slide, but what I wanted to show about this slide is how, there's certain chemicals in the brain that are also responsible for our health. Because like when you take medication, for example, serotonin is what, there's a medication called SSRI, serotonin selective reuptake inhibitor. And what it does, it leaves more serotonin in the system, because this is one of the neurotransmitters in the brain that's connected with depression. And so when the serotonin is low, as you can see, you might have decreased appetite or increased appetite, problems with sleeping, more depression. So inside the brain, you have these neurotransmitters, and these are also affected by nutrition, right? So if you're not eating well, or if you're not sleeping well, all of these are going to be thrown off. And so that's why another key component is making sure you're eating well and you're getting good sleep and you're getting exercise and self-care in there, in order to keep, again, the mind, the body, and the spirit all connected and going well. And then we talk about, looking at, well, how is the different areas affected when your mental health isn't good? And as you can see, not wanting to go through all of them, but just a little understanding, when you're experiencing mental health issues, in the mind, you might see things like worrying, difficulty making decisions, negative self-talk, your behavior. You might be more accident prone, which is dangerous in terms of being an athlete, right? When you're trying to do whatever you're trying to do, whether you're playing, I'm a lover of basketball, but you're playing basketball and you're on the court, and if you're accident prone, you're more likely to maybe cause an injury. Sometimes you might have the insomnia. In terms of emotions, again, we talked about a little about experiencing more depression, anxiety, but sometimes people also fail to understand that there's such thing as an agitated depression, which manifests as irritability or aggression. People would dismiss it as anger, but it could be the agitated depression. In the body, you might see it as headaches or taut muscles, twitches, being really tired. The goal is over here is you want to have, I can't even see this other part of the slide. I move it over. You want to make sure, again, that your emotional health is good. And again, that could be whatever that be. It could be needing to talk to someone. And I'm kind of going ahead a little bit on things you can do, but it's the nature of how I want to just stay focused. So emotional health, it could be, again, making sure you're eating a healthy diet, talking to people, reaching out to people, movement and exercise, keeping the body going. Because sometimes depression, another side effect of depression is you literally can feel, people tell you that they feel like their legs feel like logs. Your whole body is achy and hurt. And that's why also movement is important. I've been talking about nutrition, life meaning and purpose. This is another piece where sometimes people get disconnected from is you're so absorbed with everything else that you've gone lost what's important to you, maintaining and finding what's important to you. You know, you started out wanting to do this sport, but then you don't have the same love for it anymore. And you gotta really think about, like, is this something that is this something that's what's best for you, right? Is this something that I really want to keep doing, especially if what you started, how you started it, is no longer the same as you're doing it. Health behavior, again, you know, making sure your body is, you know, doing the physical, making sure that everything on you is working properly. And then the mind body connection, you know, I've done yoga. I like sound healing. We don't always have to go into traditional healing of going to a therapist or medication. There are alternative things you can do. And so again, remembering that everything is connected to everything, nothing occurs in isolation. And so if you're not taking care of yourself, your mental health, it will manifest it somewhere physically. For instance, you know, like, let's say you're experiencing a lot of stress and tension, right? If you don't address that, you know, this is where the headaches come in. And now it becomes a physical problem that you're going to see the doctor on. But if you had learned to manage your stress, you wouldn't necessarily have to have gone to the doctor to get some assistance for these headaches that are happening. And then on this slide, I just wanted people to be aware of what are the symptoms of depression and anxiety and stress, because sometimes we're not aware of it. You know, there are, like I was talking last time, the vegetative symptoms of depression, where you can have the hypersomnia or insomnia. You know, sometimes people can think of it as like, oh, well, you know, I just got a lot going on and, you know, I'm not really, you know, sleeping. Well, is it just because you're so busy? And it would be situational, or is it something that's been going on? And with depression symptoms, it's usually, you know, when we have this thing called the depression inventory. So when I minister it to people, it's based on 2 weeks. If any of these symptoms have been going on longer than 2 weeks, a 2-week period, you really need to do some type of intervention. Again, not necessarily medication, not necessarily talking to someone. You can maybe start with yourself. But if it's going on longer than that, then you really need to look to doing something different. Again, symptoms of anxiety. I'm not going to read through them, but again, I wanted you guys to have awareness what to look for, because sometimes we don't know that, again, using the sleep disturbance, because that's a nice one, that is a symptom of anxiety. You know, we think sometimes, well, you know, I got a lot of finals I'm studying for, and so this is why, you know, I'm not really sleeping that well. Or, you know, I got to call, you know, we got this big game coming up. Again, now the big game could be causing the anxiety, but if it's going beyond a period, you really need to look at possibly doing something to help you with that, to manage that anxiety. So when we talk about the collegiate athlete, what are some of the things that they might be experiencing? You know, what kind of mental health issues? So, you know, when you transitioning from high school to college in and of itself can be a stressor. I know even just for the normal college student, it's a stressor, because you're going from, sometimes, you know, you can be homesick, but you're also going from being kind of more so guided to being more independent and having more responsibility for yourself. But as an athlete, I think the schedule is much more rigorous, right? And although you're there, a lot of times you're there for your academics, but remember, you're also there for your sport. And so the difficulty of trying to balance the two of those, of your academics, your social relationships, and your sports, can cause a lot of anxiety. You know, maybe you're used to being the top player on your team, because you see this a lot of times. You see this where, you know, you come from the, you know, high school and you were the #1 player, and now you're in the on a collegiate level and you're trying to earn your spot, right? And sometimes you don't always earn that spot. That can affect your mental health and your self-esteem. You know, you also have performance pressure, right? You really want to do well. You know, the coach is putting the demands on you. You know, you need to do this. You're putting these pressures on yourself, which then can, again, cause an anxiety, affecting how you feel about yourself. All of this then can lead to you maybe causing some type of injury, or you losing the love of your sport. body image. That's a whole nother one itself. You know, body image is important because we know a lot of girls suffer from eating disorders because they're trying to maintain, you know, I was reading an article today where in gymnastics, you know, a lot of time the coaches will tell the gymnasts that they're overweight, and so they want to, you know, they undereat, or they're what we call binge eating, or they're you know, vomiting to maintain their weight. I was reading a story about Simone Biles where she was talking about when they were away at camp, how the refrigerator was locked up and they would sneak downstairs to try and get food, you know. And so in terms of body issue, what's important for you is that you, everything, all of it, when it comes down to, is that you have self-awareness about what works for you. Yes, you have what the coach is saying. Yes, you need to be a certain way to be on the field, but if it's not aligned with what works for you, then you need to do things differently. The last thing that I wanted to talk about also is that isn't talked a lot about is sexual violence that occurs among female athletes, and the lack of wanting to report it. You know, a lot of times, and this is, some of it is with coaching staff and some of it is by other athletes. And, you know, sometimes some of the reasons that people, athletes may not want to report is the stigma connected to it, right? Afraid that they're going to be blamed about it, afraid that some behavior they were doing was the result of it, afraid that people are going to look at them negatively. And this is the same way with mental health. There's such a stigma about mental health also. And that if I say I need help, I'm going to be viewed as weak, because, you know, the athlete, you present an image of being strong, self-assured, and confident. And so if I reach out for help, or if I let someone know what happened to me, I'm going to be viewed as weak. And that's one thing we have to shift how we view mental health, how we view sexual assault against female athletes. When we talk about managing mental health issues, you know, again, I talked last time in the last week's session about self-care. I think it's very important that you have a self-care plan. And so you see here the different components of what you to have. So like when we're talking about physical care, you know, again, can't harp enough upon the nutrition, you know, getting good sleep. I'm different. I only need 4 to 6 hours, but the average normal person needs about 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And the reason why, you know, sleep is important because it allows our cells to regenerate and our body to heal. Making sure we're getting enough water intake, especially at the, you know, to avoid dehydration, then again, which all affects our cells. Supplements. I talked about breathing last time, and you know, I kind of want to do it again because I think it's important, because sometimes we don't stop enough to take a second to breathe. You know, we're all breathing right now, but literally taking a second and just stopping and slowing our mind down and taking that deep breath in and slowly releasing it. And it allows us to get our, you know, to our thoughts to be clear and to be in what we call wise mind versus emotional mind, which we tend to make not such great decisions. And then, you know, you have spiritual self-care. Again, you know, it could be prayer and meditation, finding purpose and meaning, making sure you're enjoying what you're doing, enjoying your sport, and being okay if you're not. People support, networking is so key. You know, one of the things they did find that did help a lot of college athletes in terms of their mental health is the connectedness of their team, feeling like they can talk to their team and reach out to fellow teammates and talk about what's going on. You know, because a lot of times when you're going through some of this, you feel like you're alone, and all of a sudden you start talking to someone and you find that they have a shared experience. And so it takes away some of that isolation and the stigmatization to know that other people are going through the same thing you're going through. But also again, I talked about if you feel like you need to reach out to a therapist. Some people want to talk to their religious leader, talk to your family members. Lifestyle, structure and routine. So again, when we're talking about I talk about balance, you want to prioritize what's important. So yes, you're there to play the sport, but you're not going to do yourself or anyone else any good if you're not taking care of other things that are important. So prioritize things. I literally, with one of my clients, I had her make a skeleton of a schedule of things that were necessary to get done. And then I had her also put in there self-care stuff, right? So build within your schedule. So yes, I have to be in training or in practice from this time to this time, but at this time, this is my time for me, whatever that may look like, whether it's just sitting there and, being on social media for a little bit, if that feels good, if it's going for a walk, if it's spending time with friends, that's as important as doing your practice. Setting goals for yourself. What do you want to trying to achieve? What matters to you? Okay, this is what I want. This is where I want to be. Set those goals for yourself. Spend time in nature. Do things that are pleasurable for you. Mental health and emotional self-care. Positive self-talk, that's one of my techniques. But positive self-talk, positive belief. It is so easy, I think, as an athlete, when you're experiencing that pressure, or maybe you didn't win the game. It's so easy to go into negative self-talk and self-blame, and that's just not helpful to our mental health. And so one of the things is, when you start feeling yourself doing that spinning or spiraling down on that self-talk, negative self-talk, is you got to catch yourself, stop, and then try and focus on the positive. There's always, as they say, a silver lining in everything. So maybe we didn't win this time, but what did we do good? Well, you know what? We still got them on this area here. We didn't win the game, but our defense was amazing. We really stopped them on over here. Or did you see that 3-point play? I'm sorry, I'm basketball. Did you see that 3-point play she did? Give props for things that did go well, and then talk about, okay, you know what? Yeah, maybe we didn't do so well, but this is what we're going to do next time. This is what we're going to do differently, so that you're not engaging in, because you start with the negative self-talk and you keep going, oh man, I did so bad. I'm no good. Whatever, you're going to end up taking yourself down to a negative place, which then also, as I showed you the slide earlier about the chemicals, they feed off of that too. So now you're decreasing some of these chemicals in your brain, which then now it's a vicious cycle. So now you got the negative self-talk. You're also less likely to engage in good nutrition. You're going to get that, you know what? I'm going to get those potato chips. I'm going to eat that fast food. And then, so now you're going to have a drop, because the carbs don't do nothing but, what is it called? You got to forgive me. You have the sugar rush, and then it drops and it crashes. Or you might you might decide, well, let me go get a drink. I'm just going to have a beer or two. And we know alcohol is a depressant on the system. So now you're doing all these things that it's comforting in the moment, right? It feels good, but ultimately it's going to make you feel bad. So we need to, shift and stay with things that are good for us, and that's going to keep us in a positive way. And that doesn't mean not to feel, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, if you're feeling this negative stuff, make sure you have healthy coping skills to counter it. Don't let yourself slip further and further down before it's too late. But also recognize when you are slipping and that you need something beyond what you can do. You can go try and talk to the coach. If that's not enough, then, or talk to friends. If that's not enough, seek out, go to the counseling center. That's what it's there for. Go see someone. Talk about what's going on. Talk about these feelings you're having. Talk about the depression. You don't have to suffer alone. Some people do journal writing because they're not comfortable talking to people because they're not used to expressing their feelings. You can start with journal writing first, right? And then you start putting your feelings down, and then you can work up to being able to talk to someone. But the idea is not to hold this stuff in, because when you hold it in, it has to come out somewhere. And then my last slide, just some other different techniques to talk about is a container. So this is a technique I learned in is with EMDR. And so they say, what you do is you imagine this container, and I'm gonna give you an example. One of my clients used, he created a chest, and you can design it however you want it to be. And it was like, it was just a regular brown chest. He decided to put a lock on it. And what you do is this container is sometimes, like if you're in the middle of training or if you're in the middle of a game and maybe you do have some negative emotion come up, and you can use this in general when you're experiencing any type of negative emotion or something that's really uncomfortable, is you take that and you put it in the container and you leave it in the container. Doesn't mean you're avoiding it. It just means you're putting it in the container because right now you can't deal with it. And it's safely put away. And when you put it in the container, you have to leave it there. You can't talk about it until you're ready to deal with it later. And then maybe, you're done with the game or you have some time, you can then take it out the container and you can try and process it and deal with it. Another thing we did is you think about a happy place. So, for instance, my happy place is I'm going to the beach. Now, mind you, I can't swim, but I imagine myself like it's almost like a guided imagery thing. And I do it for myself, but sometimes I tell people it's like, so I'm going to take you guys to my happy place. So just close your eyes a second. All right. And we're walking up to the beach. And before we walk there, there's a field of grass, and it's that fresh grass that hasn't been cut yet. And so you can feel it below your feet, and it's soft and cold and like kind of cool. And as we walk further, we're coming up to the beach where the sand is so nice and white. It's that white crystal sand that it's not too hot, but it's just hot enough that it feels good under the feet. And we can smell the salt from the ocean. And then we looked inside the water and it's this turquoise blue. And you can see to the bottom of it some shells and rocks. And there's like a nice breeze blowing, and you lay your towel down on the sand, and the sun is beaming down on you, and it's not too hot, but it's comforting and it's healing. And you can hear the waves as they're going in and out, and the breeze blowing. That's my happy place. And so whenever you can open your eyes. Whenever I'm feeling something or I feel like I need to get away and I can't physically get away, I just take myself to my happy place. And then we talk about, as I was talking before, about maintaining a positive attitude. And again, just it's really self-awareness. When you start hearing yourself kind of shift into negative, stop it. Stop the thought right there and do some self-talk. It's okay, Gina, you got this. We didn't do so good today, but we're going to get them next time. And the last thing, I'm not going to do a full extensive progressive muscle relaxation because it can take like 30 minutes. But basically what the idea about this is relaxation is we're going to start with the face, right? And so you take your face muscles. First of all, I always start with, let's take a deep breath together. Just let it out. I always do that also because I can find myself speaking faster, and it allows me to slow down my speaking. And so you're going to tense your face muscles really, really tight. And you're going to hold it and then slowly release. And then you do your neck muscles. And slowly release. And you should be able to feel the tension going from your body. And what progressive muscle relaxation does is then you go to the arm muscles, you do the chest muscles, you tighten the abdomen, you tighten your leg muscles, you do the calf muscles, and then you do your feet. And by the time you're done with that, it's like giving yourself a massage without all the pain. So that is my talk. I don't know if people have questions for me or if they about anything I mentioned.
Certainly. So we invite you, if you have any questions for Dr. Wilson, to put them in the Q&A feature. Dr. Wilson, thank you so much for laying out so clearly the psychosocial landscape of what young women are encountering during their college experience, and especially young women athletes in the college experience, and including with that the techniques and the other tools that are necessary for building a healthier lifestyle. If you have questions for Dr. Wilson, we encourage you to put them in the Q&A feature. And even if you have questions later on, we encourage you to put them in the Q&A and they will be addressed at the end of our conversation. Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Can I add one other thing?
Sure.
I just want to say one other thing. You know, Tina Thornton last week, I really liked what she had said. And I want to leave the 3 things that she said that was really important, that she said, being authentic, being yourself, speaking your truth, having self-awareness, knowing, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but being in touch with yourself. And the last thing she said was networking and support. You add those 3 things in your life, you'll be all right.
You will be all right. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. In addition to what we have already heard, I do want to introduce myself. I'm Melinda Johnson, the Director for Community Engagement and Advocacy with the YWCA Hartford region. And I'm excited to go further into this conversation as we explore not only the mental health stressors and challenges that women in sports are facing, especially at the college level, but tonight to dive deeper into what do the inequities in college sports look like for young women. So what you're about to see next is a clip of a news broadcast that took place earlier this year when it was discovered that in the 2021 NCAA tournament that there were significantly inequitable conditions that were obvious between the women's training facility and the men's training facilities, in addition to other things like meal planning, as well as COVID-19 testing requirements. We'll see from this example, just using the NCAA tournament of this year as an example, that women in college sports are constantly fighting to compete and competing against the pressures of an industry that originally was not designed to be this inclusive. But we are moving forward. Take a look at this clip.
And beyond, calling foul after seeing this video posted on TikTok by an athlete participating in the women's NCAA tournament. Many were outraged to see the difference in the workout facilities given to the men's and women's teams during March Madness. But there is so much more to this story, and Ava Pilgrim is with us now. Good morning, Eva.
Good morning, Robin. You know this. Women have long been fighting for equity in sports. Basic things like uniforms, training facilities, and equipment in sports. But in these pictures, everyone can now see the difference is glaring.
This morning, following a major backlash and calls of blatant inequality.
Guess what, guys? We got a weight room, yeah!
The NCAA upgrading the weight room for the student athletes at the Women's March Madness tournament. The weight room installed after University of Oregon forward Sedona Prince posted a TikTok video that went viral.
This is our weight room. Let me show y'all the men's weight room.
That video now viewed more than 7 million times, igniting instant criticism. Stanford coach Tara Vanderveer tweeting, "This cannot continue to be business as usual." Going on to write, "Women athletes and coaches are done waiting, not just for upgrades of a weight room, but for equity in every facet of life." South Carolina coach Dawn Staley says the disparities are glaring.
No, we shouldn't be happy with just getting the bare minimum. If the men got a tournament off and they're rolling out the red carpet for them, then that's our expectation.
The NCAA responding.
I care about women's basketball and women in sport. We fell short this year.
But it's not just the weight room. The COVID tests, different for the men's tournament, the more accurate PCR tests. At the women's, antigen tests. The NCAA saying that both forms of testing were equally effective models. And another major complaint, the food. This video getting nearly 4 million views.
It looks like we got some kind of meat here.
The NCAA says it immediately addressed the issue with the hotels and spoke with teams about finding more flexible food options. Another complaint, a quick look at the official March Madness Twitter account. The bio reads, the official NCAA March Madness destination for all things Division I NCAA men's basketball. No mention of the women's tournament.
And South Carolina coach John Staley tweeting this blistering statement, quote, how do we explain that to our players? How can an organization that claims to care about all member institution student athlete experiences have a copyrighted term that only represents one gender? And Robin, I want you to know, I checked the official March Madness Twitter again this morning. The bio is still the same. No mention of the 64 women's team participating in this tournament.
So they still haven't changed it?
They have not changed it.
Even after what Don put out there and people now knowing that. All right. Eva, thank you so much. I played college ball in the 80s. You would think after all of this time, and it's so blatant.
Right.
But the reaction from people, it was heartwarming to see people reacting, not just athletes and not just fans of the sport, but just saying, because sport is a microcosm of society.
Yes, exactly. And I was going to ask you if you felt like maybe there's going to be some change because of the reaction, that it is so different this time.
We're going to ask Christine Brennan about that in our next hour.
All right, looking forward to that.
You set me up with that really good.
Perfect.
That was a great assist. That was a nice bounce back.
Thank you. All right.
Sports is a microcosm of our overall society. That is quite a statement made at the end of that clip there. And it is our hope that we will unpack some of what you saw displayed in that conversation. So we're going to get into a very exciting part of our night where we're going to hear from some women that are participating in college sports, including a few coaches and a player who from diverse perspectives will share with us what it looks like to combat and face these inequities in collegiate sports. With us as a panelist tonight, we have Ava Kovac. She is in her 22nd season as the head women's rowing coach at Connecticut College. She also serves as the department's senior women administrator, associate director of athletics, and as adjunct professor of physical education. Aside from her responsibilities at Connecticut College, Kovac has experience working in various roles at national rowing events and international regatas. This includes the FISA World Rowing Championships as well as the Olympic Games. Her passion is to encourage women to find strength and power from their participation in sports. She has used sports as the vehicle to see the world and to become a better global citizen. Ava, thank you for joining us. With us also, we have Jen Nardi. Jen Nardi enters her first season as head coach of the Hartford women's lacrosse team in 2022, becoming the second coach in the young 4-year history of the program in September 2021. Nardi joins the Hawks from Manhattanville College, where she served as head coach of the Valiants for 4 seasons from 2018 to 2021. Prior to landing at Manhattanville, Nardi was the head coach at Smith College from 2012 to 2014. In her first season in 2012, she led the Pioneers to the finals of the ECAC New England Region Championship for the first time in program history. She also served as the interim head coach at Colby Sawyer College in 2007, where she helped lead the team to an 8-7 record and a and a Commonwealth Coast Conference tournament berth. With us, we have also Emlyn Patry. Emlyn is a neuroscience major at Trinity College and captain of their field hockey team, member of Trinity's Student Athlete Advisory Committee in 2020 and 2021, and member of the World Language Honors Society. She partners on her high school's unified basketball team, coaches and referees youth field hockey and lacrosse. So we're welcoming Jen and Emlyn with us. And I believe Emlyn will actually join us a little later in the conversation, as they did have a practice in preparation for an upcoming championship. So we're excited about that. But we do have her coach with us in the person of Ann Parmenter. Ann Parmenter begins her 21st season as the head field hockey coach at Trinity College in 2021. She guided the Bantams to an 8x8 record and a 14th consecutive NESCAC championship tournament appearance in 2019. And through the pandemic shortened 2020-21 year, that was limited to an on-campus training and a handful of spring scrimmages. In 2018, the Bantams posted a 12-6 record and made runs in both the NESCAC finals and the NCAA Division III quarterfinals. Trinity finished 2017 as the number 11 ranked field hockey team in the nation. Parmenter ranked 49th among all NCAA field hockey coaches, 25th among active NCAA field hockey coaches, and 12th among active Division III field hockey coaches in wins in the most recent record book, and has taken Trinity to 14 NESCAC tournaments and 4 NCAA tourneys since 2000. So we welcome Ann with us as well. Ladies, let's dive into this conversation. So before we get to our formal questions, I would love to hear your responses to the video clip that was played. What emotions, what memories, what challenges does that video clip spring for you? And I'll start with Ava, sorry.
Thanks. And first of all, thank you for having me as part of the panel for tonight's discussion. I know when that clip first came out and it hit all of the social media networks and all of the actual news networks, it gave me a great respect for how much things have changed in the world of coaching and how fast information moves and how you can be one place, thousands of miles away and be kept up in real time as to what was going on in the moment and how those athletes felt. So being able to be part of that in terms of history and just watching their reaction to how that looked to them, how it felt to them, it was pretty riveting. And just hearing their voice was pretty thrilling. So I think that's my first reaction, was like, good for them. Good for them for saying something.
Yeah, I think that was a feeling for most of us. These last 2 years have been that year where what we see on social media, what we see on the news means more to us than ever before, because what seems like something that's far away is now deeply intimate with all of us. I think there's a great awakening in our responses just as human beings to seeing other human beings face challenges. So thank you for that, Eva. And I'm so glad that you are there with Emlyn. Glad you all made it through practice. Awesome. And still have smiles on your face. That's great. Any thoughts or reflections to that news clip? What were your thoughts, Ann and Emlyn?
I mean, I'll start. Ava, it's great to see you after all these years. Old colleague, so great. And thanks for inviting us, and apologies for joining the call late, obviously, but out there doing the thing. I think when I saw that video, I mean, I was shocked, disgusted, 50 years since Title IX, and this is still happening. And then Emlyn will talk more to this. We are living a situation here currently at Trinity where they were building bleachers for football, and it was going to be two-sided structure with bleachers coming down for field hockey and lacrosse. And it took 3 months to build football, and then we were told ours were going to be built in a day. And then when that day came and they were done, they didn't look anything like we were shown initially. And that's where Emlyn stepped in and created a whole group of female student athletes who used that video as their calling to arms, if you like. And they have pretty much single-handedly forced the institution to acknowledge that what was built was just not acceptable. But Emlyn is the one who is driving this movement here, and it's only just started. And I think news media, newspapers have got this story now, and we've lived it this whole season of being staring the face of these huge football bleachers and us having like 5 rows. So I will let Emlyn talk about the action that they took as students. And I think they're just so much more brave to have a voice nowadays than maybe years ago we might have done, and are not willing to accept it anymore. So Emlyn.
Certainly. Thank you. Emlyn, tell us about your advocacy.
Yeah, no, I saw that video when it was first posted back in the spring, I believe it was. And back then it was the same emotions, like disgusted, shocked, like saddened. And then this fall coming back on campus, it was like that video now becomes apparently relatable, which is like a worse feeling, I think, where it's not like you're seeing it and it's sad. It's like we're living through this, and you start to pick up on more things within like the community that also like aren't right and shouldn't be happening to women. So you start to like be more, your eyes are open to a lot more things that kind of slip under the rug before that you usually like accepting and like nodding your head to. So like now, like seeing videos and people take a stand like that, like seeing other people do that, we had a little more fire to the fuel, which is a really cool thing, and why people should be speaking up on when there's disparity or inequity problems. So once like a certain amount of people start to do it, it like gives the path for other people to follow and be like, you know what, this isn't okay, so we're going to speak up about this. So that's when we started a petition. We started a group of female athletes to like collectively come together and have like a safe space for us to voice the disparities that we're feeling. And then we tried to be really classy about getting all of the stuff that we feel is wrong, bringing it to the school, bringing it outside of the school to get a voice heard, because like in that video was shown, like that was the most effective way, because there are numbers in situations like this. There's a lot of females out there, and I think a lot of people are fed up with a lot of inequity issues. So once you can get the word out, that's kind of what our first initial step was, and to stay classy about it throughout the progress of it, and also not accept stuff, because as we continue to go through this process, it's like, oh, well, we'll give you this instead. And it's keeping our foot down and being like, well, no, we deserve exactly what the male athletes on campus are getting. We deserve the same as that. We're not going to just shift a little bit to like say, oh, this is a little bit better than what we've got, and we deserve the same equal equality, equity all across the board for the sports. And I think that's what we've come to recognize. And after we've spoken up on that, it's sticking with that and following through.
Yeah, that's brave, bold, and powerful work. And to be doing all of that, in addition to attending your classes, in addition to attending your practices and heading to the championships, in addition to whatever else you have going on personally, that's incredible work. That's incredible work. So thank you for doing that, because I don't know how many, for those that are attending, for those that'll see this video later, how many of us will have daughters or nieces or sisters that are going through similar experiences, and that, like you said, just shrug their shoulders and nod and keep it going, because it's just something that must come with the game, right? And it's not. So thank you for the work that you're doing in that space. There's something that you said that I just want to pluck at just a little bit. And you said that we are working to do all of these things in a way that's classy. Now, what is it about a woman advocating? Our CEO at the YW has a quote on her bookshelf that says, well-behaved women Never.
Seldom make history.
Seldom make history. Thank you, my dear. That is it right there. You hit the nail on the head.
My
and there's
grandma
something,
so.
there's something about that feeling of, oh, we have to do it in a particular way. Can we speak to those stigmas of why is it that girls feel they have to be well behaved?
I think for us, it's a lot of time females are considered like complainers, or like you get that like, oh, she's just angry, she's going to complain about it. So for us going through with it, it's not staying classy in the sense of being like well behaved. And which is harder, and this is like sad, is to be taken very seriously as a female. You have to be well-rounded in every corner for that, or else it's going to be another kind of like dismissed thing. So for us especially, we were aware of that going into it. And just in general too, for stuff to go through, you need to obviously have a well-rounded case. You need to know your facts. You need to be aware of all those things. But for us, it was really important to we were feeling a lot of emotions during this. And women are classified as emotional in this stuff. So we really tried really hard to separate our emotions from being able to get things done for females. And so we wanted to keep emotions aside from it and let it fuel us passionately. Like Anne says, use it to fuel you on the field, use it to fuel like how much you're putting effort into this, but separate it and get the job done well. And that's kind of what we were going on for that.
Thank you. And I do want to point out that our fourth panelist, Jen Nardi, is having some technical difficulties, so hopefully she'll join us later in the conversation. On that same idea of the stigmas that women and girls in sports face, there's a quote by Samantha, also known as Sam, Samantha Monroe, who was the 2020-2021 basketball season. She was named to the All-College Conference of Illinois and Wisconsin second team, and she was named team's All-American Titan honoree. And one of the things that she said is, breaking the stigma means that together as teammates and competitors, we are to acknowledge and accept all emotions, much like you were speaking to, Emlyn. Supporting and respecting one another through our experiences can help every student athlete's mental health. Breaking the stigma means breaking it together. But more so, I want to explore with you, and Ava, I'd love your input on this. What are the stigmas associated with women in sports? What are some of the stigmas you've seen amongst your team?
So this is a really interesting question. When I first arrived at Connecticut College, I was a staff member, and then eventually we evolved into being adjunct faculty members. So we all teach 4-credit courses, some sport activity courses that are 1 courses, some big courses that are actually 4-credit classes. And one of the courses that I've grown into teaching as a senior member of the faculty within the athletics department is a class called Contemporary Issues in Sport. And this question is one of the biggest questions that we ask the class when we start teaching this leg of gender in sport. What does sport look like now in contemporary society? And the discussion is really animated because the women in the class tend to be very passionate about their participation in sport and what that looks like, and how their participation in sport has shaped their views of who they are and how they present themselves on campus with their families, job hunting. So it's a great question, and it's an evolving answer. And I think one of the funniest things that we talk about in classes is why when we see all the advertising for sport products and sport marketing, why are women completely staged in their presentation of that media? So you'll see somebody with full-blown makeup on and an outfit that you would never wear for competition, but yet there they are. But there's another picture, a juxtaposition of a male athlete standing up there proud and sweaty, dripping in sweat, and they're looking at the 2 pictures side by side. What's wrong with this? So I would pose that as another question, like, what is wrong with this? What's wrong with being proud to be athletic, sweaty, muddy, participating in what we love to do? Or does it have to be staged because society wants us to look a certain way? So what is the deeper root or deeper question to this? Because I think you cannot look at how we view sport and society and women in sport in contemporary times without looking at what the past was like for us in terms of participation. You can't avoid that discussion. Like how have we evolved in sport, and how have we gotten to where we are now? And I think, much to what Ann has alluded to, she and I were colleagues at Connecticut College for 1 year. And that was a very transformative year for me professionally, because Ann stood up for her rights, was very vocal about what she thought was right, and really was well thought of in our community campus as a very vocal and a big advocate for women on campus and women in sport. So how are we supposed to look? Like, what is the female athlete? That's really what I keep trying to answer in my career.
Yeah, because it's those stigmas that fuel the inequities that Emily's talking about. It's that perception that women athletes are less than, or less masculine, or less deserving of a space to be competitive. But I like that you pointed out that Ann has been a trailblazer in this space for a while. And clearly it's showing up in your coaching style, why you are not just rearing amazing athletes, but also amazing advocates. So Ann, can you speak to how do you coach to break these stigmas?
Wow, I don't know. I think something that, and through this process, I think Emlyn and I have a very different relationship now as coach and player through her work this season than we had before all of this happened, because I feel like we're definitely fighting this kind of like a little bit of an invisible battle in some respects of trying to go to the administration with this, but doing it in a way where, as Emlyn spoke, you need to get your ducks in a row. You need to be very articulate. You need to have all the facts right. But for me, and I think the situation that Ava was talking about, for me as a person, there comes a point in your life where you are faced with something that is absolutely wrong or right. Mm-hmm. And many of us have those moments where you can just see that what was being built was so wrong, or something that might be done is so wrong. And as a bystander, do you step up, or do you choose to say, oh yeah, well, that's just what we've got because I've got a nice field, but I don't deserve to have this. And I think the agreement for my athletes was, this was so abhorrently wrong, what was happening, that you couldn't not speak. And then having dialogue with students, they have the loudest voices here in this community. And I think Ava would agree, as a woman coach, you're afraid for your job. And if you speak up and people don't like it, it doesn't matter how long you've been at a place, we see this all the time. How do we best now approach this to get the desired effect, which is to do what you're supposed to do so that it's right? And it's so obviously wrong to the women, but the discussion, even trying to talk to male athletes, some male athletes, and they have to be our biggest advocates, is they have to have a voice in the room with us. Some of the deans have come and spoken to us. They have daughters, and I just appealed to the dean that you have a daughter, and your daughter was doing a paper on coaching. And I said, and did you explain to your daughter that she should expect to have less than her male counterpart? Did you explain that to her? Because look at what you're looking at on our campus right now, a glaring example. And who approved it? I'm sure there were no women in the room when these blueprints were approved. And these were the discussions that we had. So between Emlyn and her group of now more and more women are coming out of the woodwork from other sports, because as Emlyn spoke, it's women swimmers, their locker room has had no heat, but they just got used to the fact it's had no heat for years and years and years, until you find out that it's like, well, wait a minute, the men's have heat, but we just have never complained. Because, so I think it's just a standing by your principles. And I want to coach young women that I want to win more than anybody, but I don't want to cheat to win. And so having really strong morals and ethics that you then transfer over into your everyday life, and you have to live your life that way. And if your institution is going to say, and you're wrong or you're bad for teaching that, then at some point you have to say, then I can't be a part of this. And so I think it's finding young, smart women who also are going to live their lives with a high moral standard and then be willing to speak. But, you know, even members of our own team, it's uncomfortable for them to speak out because they have not been raised to have that voice. And it's been an interesting journey to see which women will stand next to Emlyn and do this. And I've been so proud of them because it takes an awful lot of courage to have a Zoom meeting with the president of the college about this.
It does. It takes an awful lot of courage to say out loud what you feel in your heart isn't right, and to say that out loud and stand by it. And so I think what you also express, a couple of things that are key are, one, the need for allies, male allies that are occupying the spaces, to be able to have that vulnerability and awareness to say, maybe you're right, something's not right. And to be able to give space for women then to have their own voice at those tables of decision. And also the importance that sports is a space where we're taught about rules and we're taught about goals and we're taught about teamwork. These are things that are driven by certain moral values, and the space of sports needs to also reflect that in the way that they equitably treat women alongside their male counterparts. So one of the questions that I want to dive into a little bit deeper, tonight we would have had with us as a guest speaker, Rebecca Lobo, but unfortunately, or fortunately, very fortunately, she's not able to join us as her daughter is also preparing for championships. So we're excited for her. But Rebecca Lobo has been quoted saying, there is nothing masculine about being competitive. There's nothing masculine about trying to be the best at everything you do. Or is there anything wrong with it? I don't know why a female athlete has to defend her femininity just because she chooses to play sports. Now, college is really that opportunity and that phase of firmly establishing your identity. Really that transition from childhood and leaving the nest, that whole thing, leaving the nest and venturing out into the world on your own. And a part of that comes with when you're in these spaces, these sports or these male dominated or predominantly narrated as masculine spaces, being able to own your own femininity. Emlyn, can you share with us what challenges to women in college sports, what challenges they have faced as a result of sports being culturally characterized as a masculine space?
The first thing that comes to mind is actually when we did put the petition out and we were starting to like raise voices about the disparity on our campus, a lot of male athletes actually kind of retaliated against that, making comments to a lot of the females being like, oh, like, well, it's field hockey, like no one's gonna watch it anyway, like it's the women's sport, you don't have the same numbers as we do, like maybe if you got more numbers, like all this stuff which like puts females down for feeling something, I think. And it's one of those things that like when you first hear it, you're kind of like, oh, that's weird because these are like your friends on like other teams and like you're going through the same thing. Like we have the same schedule for practices, for like lifts, we do all the same stuff as them, where we have the same amount of time that's committed to the sport. So it's kind of like, why is that any different from you? But I read this quote in a philosophy class that I'm taking right now, and I just actually wrote a paper on female versus male and femininity versus masculinity. And it was talking about how men retaliate when they feel like a woman is going to take or chip away from their worth. So I think a lot of it comes from the fact of like, when girls start to speak up on something that usually doesn't, like, even it doesn't affect them, like us getting a new set of bleachers, it's not asking them to take down their bleachers and to do anything like that. But anything that they feel that if once women start to speak up against something, it's like the feminine thing is to be quiet and to stay quiet. So anything like that, I think, is frustrating. And it's like, it's not understood by counterparts sometimes. And I think that's a really hard thing in our age group and a college campus, because girls want to be friends with guys, like it wants to be like this cohesive community. So when they start to kind of like question when you're speaking up about something you care about, I think that's really hard for females to perceive it at first. And then hearing like a quote like that is kind of like, okay, it's like because we could possibly be taking something away from them, but we're not. So it's all about just educating, I think, on that end of it, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. The concept that you are growing and blossoming alongside other athletes, male and female alike, and then being felt that when you express the challenges you're facing, they are not equally heard. That's a real challenge. And the way that you are choosing to overcome it through advocacy is essential, because what happens is you end up changing the situation, not just for yourself, but for so many others to come. And so, Eva, I see you actively listening, and I see a lot of head nodding, and I can feel that there's a lot of resignation there for you. What do you have to say about how women are faced with sports being culturally characterized as a masculine space?
So unintentionally, when I first got into coaching, I didn't really realize why I was so interested in coaching. And part of it probably was I just loved sport when I was in high school and middle school and elementary school, for how it made me feel and how powerful it allowed me to become as an individual and be proud of who I was on the field, on the court, on the water. So I decided just to go into coaching when I was a sophomore in college. I started coaching the first year crew at my university just as a volunteer during the afternoons. And it became clear to me that in the world of coaching, I was entering a world that was predominantly male. And from that first experience, I said to myself, I am entering a world in which there's a lopsided power structure of what is going on between the genders, of entering a world that's considered predominantly masculine. And I didn't realize it at the time, but now that I've become older, I'm here coaching because I want to make sure there is a voice for women in coaching. I'm here because I'm not going anywhere. So I'm in it to stay in it, because it's important to have that voice. And I think part of this is being a sport historian, a sociologist of sport. When women started entering the world of sport, that all of a sudden became a threat to males in sport. Wait a second. This was a domain that was particularly ours, and now women are trying to get into this. Why? So there's always been this kind of struggle of should women be involved? Are we welcomed into this fraternity, for a lack of a better way of describing it, of sport? And I think that's always what's intrigued me. So in my role in coaching here at the college, or coaching internationally, or even working at Olympic Games, has always been, I'm proud to be a woman in sport. I'm not going anywhere. So you're going to have to address the fact that I'm a female and work with me collegially, or we're going to have a problem. So some of that, I think, really formulated for me as a young athlete, like walking into the weight room, training as a young athlete. Mostly people in the weight room back in the 80s and 90s were males. Not so much with me, because I'm like, I'm paying just as much as you are to be here as a university student. I'm going to use the weight room. I'm here, move over, let's get going. So, and we just had that same conversation with my team 2 days ago, saying, you have just as much right to be in this weight room, using this equipment, doing all of the work that you're doing, and be proud to be in here. And please make sure you let me know if you ever feel less than, because that's not what you should be feeling as a female in sport, particularly, at least within the veins of my own team and how I influence that.
Mm-hmm. And I see Dr. Wilson has her hand raised, and I want to come to you right after, just plucking at this just a little bit more, because Eva, you bring out something that's important and essential. These days, coaches aren't just coaches. They're not just the people telling you, but get your knees higher, make sure you're drinking your water. And coaches are also counselors. They're helping their team, their players work through a lot in life, especially in college. And how is it that you incorporate or how much of the coaching, if you could cut it into a pie chart, how much of the coaching that you do with your female players has to do with equipping them to advocate against these inequities? Because as it was brought up early in the conversation, this is going to come, advocating for yourself as a woman and as a female athlete is going to come up when hopefully you get to the place where you're going to semi-pro or pro. That's the ambition of a good coach, right? You want to see them go on to success, whatever that means for them, and navigating an equitable contract that has the benefits that you deserve at the salary that you deserve, navigating facilities, navigating, making sure that you are getting what you deserve and what you desire. What percentage of the coaching and counseling that you do, Anne and Ava, would you allot to that part of the work?
I that's a question that has no answer, because it depends on the situation. And I think, the situation we've been dealing with is a perfect teaching moment that you use in a way that we've tried to turn this into a positive experience, where even tonight, the temporary bleachers are being brought in, and they started working tonight at 5 o'clock during my practice again. So now there's heavy equipment, there's crashing and banging. Nobody told us it was going to happen again. And you go, well, it's okay, because we've become so good at compartmentalizing distraction that this is helping us in our play so we can focus. But we had the conversation about many of the students here are going on to, really high powered type of jobs. And as a woman, they're probably going to make 80 cents on the dollar, if that. And they probably will be offered a certain salary. And if they don't know that they can advocate for themselves to ask for a different salary, I've seen it here at Trinity where we hire young women coaches, and I will say to them before they accept the job, have you negotiated that salary? And they're like, no, I was just so happy they offered it to me. And I'm like, no, their male counterpart was like, I'm not taking that unless you give me another $10,000. And women don't know they can do that. Mm-hmm. And if they do ask for more, they then think their administrative bosses, typically male, are going to hold it against them because they held out for more money. Mm-hmm. And so women don't tend to ask for more when they start in a job, and trying to tell our students that you've been offered the job. They're not taking the job away from you, but people do think that. So you've been offered the job, so now what's the next step? So using some of these challenges and looking at them and saying, the real world is going to just be another set of bleachers. Mm-hmm. So how do you use this experience and go, you're going to have to fight for things that it's not even you deserve, it's just your right to have. Right. And so it's true, women have to work harder all the time, but continually educate the people around you to support your battle and your fight, and to have other people fight your battles and gain that strength from others being part of your battle. So you increase your numbers, and that's how this has worked. It has worked, or it is working. So
mm-hmm. Thank you. Ava, thoughts?
I was trying to take notes as fast as I could. I think I'm lucky that our institution values, at this moment in time, coaching is teaching and teaching is coaching. I mean, I think 90% of the time I go back and forth between, am I teaching right now or am I coaching? What am I doing as hopefully a mentor for these women? And seeing them come in as first years and then watching them evolve into who they are when they leave here. Do they have a voice? Do they have that strength? Have we done a good job teaching them that these are things that will help them when they leave here? Regardless of the educational institution that you're at, elementary school, high school, middle school, the collegiate level, have we done a good job helping them grow and helping them become stronger? Because they will be dealing with inequities all along. I joke with the women that I coach at times, and they, coach, what can I do to further myself along in the world of business when I get out of here? And the number one thing I tell them is learn how to play golf. Because everything happens out on the golf course. So if you're seriously looking for advice, my advice to you is go take some golf lessons. Or if we offer a golf class at school, learn how to play golf. Don't get left out just because you don't want to learn how to play golf. Learn how to play golf. So what are the tips that we can give them that as first years, second years, juniors, and then seniors, and then hopefully as alum when they come back and they say, thank you for everything you've done. I didn't realize it at the time, but I learned a lot and I'm thriving. So that's really all as an educator you want to hear.
Not just the coaching, give them the tips. I hear you. Dr. Wilson, what's on your mind?
First of all, I just want to say I'm loving this discussion and all the helpful information, wisdom that's given. I have a question for I think
Emlyn.
Hammer?
Emlyn.
Sorry, my apologies, Emlyn. So, and amazing work that you're doing, Emlyn. So my question just was because, my piece was I was talking about the mental health component. And so I was wondering, how do you think the inequities and the challenges that you face as a trying to advocate for the field hockey team, how do you think that's affected your mental health, and how are you coping or managing it?
I'd say it's definitely, there's times where it's like deplete, like, and I'll talk to Anne afterwards. We'll have like a meeting, like we had like an hour and a half meeting, and it's like you feel a lot of times like depleted from like, because there's so much like hope and so much like anger and like emotion that like what we're saying is like you want to do so much stuff and you want to see change right away, and you want people to hear you. Like I think mental health was worse at the beginning when it wasn't recognized that there was disparity. When we had asked like our AD and people like that, like when there was just a simple question like, do you recognize disparity on campus? Like, is this something that you see? And I think not hearing people validate your emotions and not saying, yes, we see this, I think that's when mentally I was drained. And like, it's like, how else? It's so visual to me. It's so like, I can see it so well. Everyone else can see it. Like, how do these people that need to see it not see that this is an issue? So I think that's when it was most difficult. But now, like continuing it, it's like, you see like a female athlete, like on the golf team, sends us an email and says, she's going through the same stuff, but in a different way. And this is what she's going through. And you see all these people coming to you and coming up being like, we are going through the same thing. I think that is more, it's adding more dopamine to me, I think, honestly, because it's like, it feels so good to have other people voice out on stuff that I was once nervous to voice out and other people were once nervous to voice out on. So I think like it's collectively created a community that's benefited my mental health, because we created this group with a bunch of female athletes and we're the ones living it, seeing it. We're the ones hearing the comments from the males teams, like when on campus, like we go through all of it and it's an emotional roller coaster, I think, to be a female athlete. But right now, like collectively, like I haven't even talked to people on the squash team before, on the female squash team, and I'm communicating with them actively. Like something like that. It's just created a community through what's going on that I think has benefited mental health. It's obviously draining, but having a female safe space, I've talked about this a bunch, is very detrimental to one's mental health, because before, looking at it now, I'm like, I had my team and stuff, but it wasn't something that we talked about like ever. Like it's a lot of the complaints we had before were more silenced, and having a space now to talk about it and know that other people are feeling the same way or they won't be judged is a really, really good thing for mental health.
Thank you. That was exactly the points you hit on. So many great points of, not getting away from the isolation, networking, getting support, having a safe space to talk about it, talking to your coach. And, your coach even earlier talked about how, you have to sometimes compartmentalize things, so that you can focus on what you need to focus on and then deal with other things later. So thank you.
Yeah. I think
Thank you, Dr. Wolf.
I think what's hard, and I would just add, and I think we had to kind of come to this agreement that because we walked out into this space every day, and it used to be my happy space, and now it's become my really angry space. It's like, because every day you're faced with this structure that was making us both just really angry, but we were doing the sport that we loved, that we had to acknowledge that during practice, we weren't going to talk about this, that we had to run practice, but then have the team actually get really fired up about that thing and channel that into what we were doing. And, you know, we've been lucky enough to get an NCAA bid for this coming Wednesday. And I said to Emlyn early on, the more successful we can be as a team, the more your voice is validated. And so our success will allow you to get to the tables that if you were not winning, you might not be given so much credibility and credence, but we need to use this as a way to get in the room. And so deliver a product, have a voice, choose to like go, okay, we can't look at this right now because we're all getting so angry. We're losing sight of what it is we're really doing because we love this. But that for me has been really hard, really hard.
Thank you for sharing. With the last few minutes that we have, I really want to chase down this concept that Dr. Wilson has provoked on the importance of mental wellness in competitive spaces. So Clara Hughes, who is a cyclist and speed skater who has won multiple Olympic medals in both sports, is quoted in saying, all the physical comes from the mental. All the physical comes from the mental. So what do colleges need to do more of to promote the mental wellness of student athletes? And feel free to share with us what your current structure is, but what do colleges need to do more of to promote the mental wellness of athletes? Hopscotch this one, anyone can jump in.
I think that's such a big question. I think being able to provide resources for student athletes, because especially at a smaller school like Ava and here at Trinity, we're relatively small, Division III school, so non-scholarship athletes who are also highly academic, but the pressure to do really well in the classroom is just as intense as doing well on the field or the court. But I think Emlyn will probably talk to this. It's that constant needing to be perfect all the time in everything. Our counseling services are understaffed, depleted. There isn't enough counseling. And then the stigma of counseling, being able to offer other support services for students that might not even be labeled counseling. I think those are the things that sometimes, yeah, financially, it's those fundings in those areas that needing more resources for students' mental health, because it's such a competitive environment in everything that they do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Anne. Emlyn, did you want to elaborate?
No, I agree. I don't think we have like stuff like I'm on the SAC team too, so it's the Student Athletic Association Club. So we have for that, we'll have like 1 month we'll post on like the Instagram and be like, what better things to do your mental health. So it's talked about in that sense. But I don't think mental health like conversations are yet embedded into athletics on like campuses yet, like other things are. Like we have surveys and we have a lot of stuff about alcohol and drug use and like what to do like on like adjusting to that on a college campus, that you go in, you do it freshman year, you do it every season. We have these things that are set into place and people are more aware of it. And even if you're scrolling through it, it's like, oh, I have this, and it's just in the back of your mind. But there's nothing embedded that we do that is about mental health. It's more like if it's mental health month, like a team will post or we'll have one conversation. But I think moving forward, just as it is with equity and race and all this stuff, I think Title IX, I think mental health, I think stuff that means a lot more to like the college athletes and that affects them more, that you don't see. Like Anne says, for us, it's like you're a college athlete, like you know that you have to have practice, you know you have schoolwork, like you're just like kind of like told to deal with that. And then if there's a bump in the road that is affecting you family wise or anything like that. It's like you just are kind of like told to deal with it, and like you're supposed to be able to handle all this stuff. So I think it's just the education and having it be more embedded as part of an athletic department's like program, and having it be so that the stigma has gone away. It's like if you have that built in, just like you have other things built in, like talking about alcohol, talking about this stuff, if you have that built into the program ahead of time, it's people aren't going to feel more nervous to go up and voice their opinions on it, or to go out and ask for help. And if you have in an athletic department, if you have a mental health one to look at. I had surgery this past year, so when I was going to PT, I also was seeing a psychologist on like what it's like going through recovery. It needs to be something that's someone in like the athletic facilities that understands what it's like to be an athlete, to be a female athlete, to be any of that kind of stuff, to be able to have someone there that it's built in, so the stigma's not there, and that it's a ready available resource.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing where you personally are in your journey. Ava, thoughts on what colleges need to do more of to support athletes, especially women athletes?
You know, this has been a discussion within our department for a number of years, and I think only within the lens of COVID have we kind of realized that there's possibly a bigger mental health crisis going on campus than there has been before. So I think in concert with COVID, what the student athletes go through may not be any different than the general student body population as well on campus with other things that students are dealing with. But I think the availability of counseling, like Amlin said, or Ann said, the lack of funding for counselors, you know, we need at least 2 to 3 more counselors in our student counseling services center. It's a 2-week wait to get in to see counseling services. That's too long. So for us, it's more like, what are the other assets on campus that we can use as coaches? Who are the right people? Our health and wellness group, our victims advocates in terms of advocacy for student survivors of abuse or assault. Like, how do we find the right people on campus to introduce the women to so they can get a face with a name, so they can feel that they can go to these people for help, other than us just being the ones that take them to an office. Like, they need to have rapport with people on campus and not just think of that person as a name. I think bringing people to practice on a weekly or monthly basis to invite people to introduce the women to the people on campus that can help is huge. But it really is, it's an issue. And I think as much as you talked about the percentage that we are doing the advocacy for the students, we are also doing the mental training and the mental advocacy as well. So we're doing a lot of counseling work just because we happen to be a lot of these student athletes people on campus. Like, I am their person, Ann is their person. We spend the most time with these students over the course of their 4 years than anybody they see, more time than they will spend with their parents, which, you know, is either alarming or the best benefit in the world. So you can think of it that way. Perks of the job. But it really is just making sure the kids are okay, the women are okay. It is a big concern.
Yeah, and that's a lot to bear, to be coach, counselor, and so much more. Well, this evening we want to thank Eva and Ann and Emlyn, and unfortunately Jen was unable to join us again. She had some technical difficulties, but it certainly has been a rich conversation. We want to thank our mental health support as provided by Dr. Regina Wilson. And what we've heard tonight and what we've received thus far in the surveys are information that we are using here at the YWCA Hartford region to stand and to uplift our mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. What you've shared with us tonight and what you've been sharing in the surveys will help us create some action and some idea around advocacy and where we can support to see equity built into the sports industry, beginning in the Hartford region and spreading beyond. We want to encourage you to take the exit survey, which is being placed in the chat right now, so that after you've reflected on the content of this conversation, You can go back and share with us what you'd like to see more of, and what are some other additional thoughts that you've had after encountering this experience tonight. We thank you for joining us again at the YWCA Hartford region, where we are on our mission to eliminate racism and empower women and promote peace, justice, and dignity for all. Until we see you again next time, we encourage you to join us for our next session. Our last Women in Equity session will actually be held on the 22nd, where we're dealing with girls. But next week, we are working with women and semi-pro to professional sports, and we encourage you to join us. We look forward to seeing you then. Till next time.